Alright, here it goes. My name is Keenan, and I'm the world's biggest Spider-Man PS4 fan. It's not an exaggeration, it's a legitimate obsession for me. I've logged hundreds of hours into the game. I've played through Spider-Man PS4 at least 15 times, and Spider-Man Miles Morales probably 7 times. I own both soundtracks on vinyl. I've purchased both art books. John Pisano's Spider-Man score was my most listened to album of 2019. I own a $300 figure. I've made some artwork for the game that you can purchase on Etsy, by the way, link in the bio. Okay, I get it. There may be bigger fans out there, but you can't underestimate my love for the game. Which is why I compiled a wish list for the sequel to Marvel's Spider-Man to ensure the game is an 11 out of 10. Because, if we're honest, the first game was a 10 out of 10. And the only way to improve on that is to make it an 11 out of 10 game. So welcome to my wish list for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Alright, let's get into it. One of the best things about Spider-Man is that he's located in one of the greatest cities in the world, New York. And New York is filled with a ton of established Marvel characters. So one of the things that I want to see in the sequel game is fun cameos. The first game was filled with a ton of Easter eggs for other Marvel characters, like the Avengers, Jessica Jones, Daredevil, Doctor Strange, and more. I wouldn't want any of these characters to take away from the Spider-Man story, so if any other Marvel characters were to show up, I'd hope it'd be in nothing more than a cameo. However, if they were to add a little side mission with Daredevil, I may lose my mind. I've been advocating for Insomniac to make a Daredevil game for years now. There have been rumors floating around on the internet that they could be in some sort of production for a Daredevil game. So, if they ever wanted to give us a soft introduction to the character, there'd probably be no better way than to introduce him with a side mission in the Spider-Man sequel. Spider-Man has a ton of cool interactions in the comics with other characters in New York City, and it just makes sense that we may actually see some in the sequel. Speaking of side missions, it brings me to the next thing that I want to see in Spider-Man 2. We have to get better side missions for our boy Spider-Man. As much as I love the first game, I cannot defend the side missions in that game. The Tombstone stuff was pretty fun, but everything else just kind of fell flat. And don't even get me started on Screwball. I'd personally love to see a few side missions playing as just Peter Parker. Maybe he's doing something to help out Feast, or maybe he's doing some sort of investigative work that doesn't require him to put on the Spider-Man suit. We've seen it done before in the City That Never Sleeps DLC, so let's expand on it. And as I said before, a side mission with Daredevil would just be the icing on the cake. Insomniac, I know you're already midway through development on this game, but if you find a way to sneak Daredevil into this game, I'll love you forever. Alright, so the next thing I want to see in this game is a little bit of a minor one, but I want to see some dynamic weather. Insomniac definitely delivered on my wish for snow with the Miles Morales game. But when I say dynamic weather, I mean I'd love to see the weather change occasionally while I'm traversing through New York City. It doesn't need to happen very often, but some variety would be nice. It's just a small little request, but it's something I'd love to see mostly for the photo mode opportunities. Okay, so this next one on my list is a bit of a big one, and I may be faced with some pushback on it, but I don't care. Here it goes. I want to see Gwen Stacy introduced at some point during the game. Now I can already hear people telling me it's too early for her to be introduced, but here's the thing. The first Spider-Man game was released in 2018. The sequel is coming in 2023. That's a 5-year gap. Do we really want to wait until the third game to introduce her? I say no. To be honest, the main reason I want to see her introduced is so that way we can get a Spider-Gwen game as soon as possible. I really want this to happen in the future. And I love the idea of making her the love interest or maybe best friend of Miles Morales. Similarly to what they did in Into the Spider-Verse. I don't need Gwen to be a main character of this game, but a tease would be nice. Let's make it happen, Insomniac. Give us the Spider-Gwen introduction. Okay, so the next thing that I want to see, and it's something that's been rumored for a while, is a symbiote version of every suit in the game. Listen, it only makes sense in my opinion. Peter is likely going to have a black suit via the symbiote. It only makes sense that there would be a black version of every suit, considering players are going to want to use whatever suit they want throughout the game, and Insomniac would have to account for that. Let's say I wanted to use the advanced suit. Well, obviously I want to see that suit in black when Peter gets the symbiote, but some players may want to use another suit. Someone out there may want to run around with the Amazing Spider-Man 2 suit, because that suit's definitely going to happen, right? Insomniac, right? Alright, let's talk about game mechanics now. There's no doubt that Insomniac met expectations with web swinging in the first game, and they improved a little bit on it in Spider-Man Miles Morales, but it definitely could be a little bit better and more dynamic. We definitely need to be able to shoot a web while already holding onto the web we're swinging on. My friend Caleb drew up some really good examples of this. You should give him a follow. He's a really great virtual photographer. But there are many things like this that should be added when it comes to the traversal, like running along buildings and streets while swinging on a web, or slingshotting yourself over a long distance. As far as combat mechanics, I hope to see more dynamic combat added and some new finishes. Miles Morales definitely improved upon the combat, so I have no doubt Insomniac has a few tricks up their sleeves for the sequel. I honestly can't wait to see what kind of finishes Insomniac comes up with Peter and Miles working together. The next item on my list comes from @itsnarcy on Twitter. If you haven't followed me on Twitter, you totally should. I asked my followers what stuff they'd like to see added to the sequel, and they came up with some really great answers, like this one from Narcy. And that's a progressive battle damage suit, meaning as you fight and progress through the story and boss battles, your suit will take more damage and look more damaged. And I like his suggestion of them being able to be fixed at research stations. If there aren't any research stations, then maybe they can have some sort of spots throughout the city where he can repair his suit. I love this idea, but I also understand maybe not everyone would be on board with it, so maybe they can add this as a feature you can toggle on and off. Next up on my list is a bit of a huge one for me, and that's the ability to go in and out of Peter's apartment. In Spider-Man Miles Morales, they gave us the ability to go in and out of Miles' apartment and his room, and I would like for the same thing to be done for Peter. I'd especially love it if they showed us an entire collection of the suits we've unlocked in his closet, and maybe in his apartment or room there's some sort of workbench where you can make adjustments to the suit, his equipment, or abilities. I get that it's a small little add-on for most people, but for me it's something that I've definitely been wanting for a while, and I'd love to see a ton of Easter eggs in Pete's room. Okay, so next up on my wish list for Marvel Spider-Man 2 is for Insomniac to expand the playable map. There's no doubt that Insomniac did great with Manhattan in the first game, and I love that they expanded on Harlem for Miles Morales, and they included more details throughout the map. But I feel like if they really want to knock this game out of the park, then they have to make the map even larger. I'd personally love to see them start with Brooklyn. Brooklyn was something I was hoping to see in the first game, and unfortunately it wasn't there. So here's to hoping that it makes it into the sequel. Secondly, I think it'd be cool to include some sort of ferry, maybe, that you can take to the Statue of Liberty. How cool would it be to take some amazing photos with the Statue of Liberty? I'd also love to see them make some subways accessible, and maybe include some sort of crimes down below the streets. The subway system is a huge part of New York City, and I would love to see that explored in the sequel. There's no doubt that the PS5 can definitely handle a bigger map for the sequel, so I'd like to see them take advantage of it. Okay, so the last thing on my wish list are just some things that I love to see from a story perspective. First off, this game's going to include Venom, which means that this game needs to be darker in tone. I want to see some sort of horror elements and tension throughout this game. Now, this is a Spider-Man story, so it doesn't need to be too dark, but I feel like adding a few horror elements would definitely enhance the Venom experience. Secondly, I really need to care about Peter and Harry's relationship, especially if Harry is going to become Venom. The first game did an okay job of explaining what kind of relationship Harry and Peter had, but I need to see that better explored in the sequel. I really hope they flesh out that relationship. I won't go too deep into plot details and things that I want to see story-wise because I'm going to save that for a much larger video, but those are just a few things that I feel are very important to me in this game. So there you have it, guys. Those are my top 10 things that I want to see in the Spider-Man sequel. Be sure to share your list in the comments below, or you can tell me on Instagram and Twitter. You can find the links to both of those in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and want to see more videos regarding Spider-Man 2. And until then, I'll see you next time.